all, my name is Michaela Moraga. I'm going to be the first person presenting in this lecture. Overall, we're going to be speaking about ancient geography from 5th century BCE to 6th century CE. I'm going to be focusing on geographic thought in ancient Babylon and Egypt. Now, ancient Egypt was located in what we now know as northeastern Africa, but at the time it was separated into Lower and Upper Egypt, which is going to be depicted on the right picture on your screen. Now, how did ancient Egyptians see the world and how did they describe it? Ancient Egyptians would actually describe the world as flat, which was done by the god Geb, which overarches the sky, done by the goddess Nut, and both are separated by Shu, which is the goddess of air. Now, ancient Egyptians would also refer to the earth as the house of Geb. The picture on the left of your screen is actually going to depict god Geb. And just as important to ancient Egyptians was their view of the universe. Egyptians believed that there were deities, which were the 4 frog-headed and 4 serpent-headed, and these deities represented darkness, water, and other important facets of life. The picture in the middle of your screen is going to be a picture of some deities that could have been seen during ancient Egyptian times. Now, deities were an important part because they represented natural forces and phenomena. Egyptians appeased and supported the deities through rituals and offerings so that the forces could work, hopefully, in their favor. But Egyptians were not only excited for life, they were also excited for the afterlife. The people who lived in ancient Egypt had a very deep understanding of the world around them. One of the main overarching ideas in the ancient Egyptian times was the relationship between heaven and God, was truly the intersection between the worlds of gods and people. Now, ancient Egyptians believed that this was so important because life on earth was only one part of the eternal journey, which did not end in death, but truly in immense joy. Now, the picture on the right of your screen is going to be 2 souls looking at earth after they have passed away, and the picture on the left of your screen is going to be looking at the earth that is looking at the sky. It is vital to note that ancient Egyptians were not afraid of death, but rather they relished in the opportunity of learning about the afterlife to help them in their views and how they saw the world they were living in. Furthermore, it is important to also understand how the Babylonians saw the world and how would they describe it. Now, the Babylonians believed that the universe was divided into 6 levels, with 3 heavens, and the highest level was the heaven of the stars. This is what the gods used to communicate with them. Also, the planets in the solar system were said to be the brightest stars in the night sky and are deemed to be most important. Now, the picture on the left of your screen is going to be a picture of the night sky and what the sky in Babylonian could have looked like. Now, further, a big part of the Babylonian world was being trained to watch the sky and tell stories to the god Marduk that created the world and the moon in its phases. Babylonians also studied the sky because they believed that the gods could and did show future events to mankind through omens, which could be seen in the sky. In addition, Babylonians strongly believed in their faith, and it truly affected how they saw the world. They were polytheistic and worshipped a large pantheon of gods and goddesses. Because of their faith, Babylonians believed in the afterlife, like the Egyptians, and were excited to see what the afterlife could bring and how the stories they saw from watching the sky could help them in the world and change their point of view. That's all for me today. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to pass it on to my next classmate.
Hey everyone, I'm going to be introducing and discussing Greco-Roman geography. I want to start with a Greco-Roman map in order to orient you to the region that I'm going to be speaking about. From this map, we can see that the Romans took over a huge amount of land in southern Europe, as well as parts of northern Africa and the Middle East, shown in this diagram as well. When the Alps were formed due to continental drift, 2 distinct societies formed around the Mediterranean. The Greeks occupied the southern area along the coast, while the Macedonians stayed further north. The Romans at this time were on the western side of the Italian peninsula, where they resided inland in order to evade naval attacks, and also here they had fertile soil while remaining in reach of the Mediterranean Sea. Greco-Roman society is rich in geographic advancement, and there were many scholars who made discoveries that are still important today. First, I want to introduce the Greeks. They used their land to form city-states, also called polis. These city-states shared cultural aspects and even held competitive games around Mount Olympus. These city-states are shown in the image on the left. The Greeks expanded rapidly through colonization around 520 BCE, while they also were able to obtain some resources from the Black Sea. These resources allowed them to create currency as well as more valuable resources like gold and fur. The Mediterranean Sea proved challenging for the Greeks as it created hostile weather conditions like hurricanes and earthquakes. From ancient Greece, we gained scholars like Eratosthenes, Socrates, Plato, Homer, Thales, Aristotle, and many more. These scholars focused on science and philosophy and were able to make great discoveries in the worlds of geometry, geography, and other scientific fields. The vast terrain and weather in this area caused these scholars to think about the aspects that were directly affecting them in their environment. They also studied tides, salinity, topography, and theories that may explain natural phenomena like earthquakes and volcanoes. Greek geography did not allow for large populations or lots of areas of natural resources. They relied heavily on trade to survive. The topographical map on the right shows the rugged terrain of Greece. Unlike the Greeks, the Romans were not divided into city-states. The Romans settled on hilltops by the Tiber River, shown in the photo on the left. Their empire began gaining power as its population grew. Roman society brought us scholars such as Ptolemy, Strabo, Polybius, and Posidonius. These will be elaborated on in the next segment, but these scholars had great advancements in physical geography. The Romans focused more on the concrete things that they could see, opposed to the more philosophical Greeks. The Romans' proximity to the Tiber and Po rivers allowed them to partake in trade, and the Alps prevented attack from that side. Both of these geographical elements were crucial in the Roman Empire's rise to power. They resided on the Mediterranean, which further amplified their trade usage as well as their ability to grow vast amounts of crops in the fertile soil. The expansion of the Roman Empire both benefited and became detrimental to their society. Spanning such a large area, it was difficult to communicate across the empire, which may have helped initiate their downfall. The fall of Rome is widely accepted to have begun when a new ruler of the western part of the empire was appointed. This was a Germanic general named Odovacar. At this time, the empire was lacking proper leadership, going through ruler after ruler for many years. The Silk Road began creating illnesses that spread throughout the empire, including smallpox, mumps, and measles. This was accompanied by monetary inflation, reduced trade, and general insecurity. The empire capital was then moved, and the Roman Empire became the Byzantine Empire. The rapid expansion of this empire proved too much to be sustainable. From the dissolution of the Roman Empire, we gained languages that evolved from Latin, as well as lasting legacies from the Greco-Roman Empire, including the Library of Alexandria, the Code of Justinian, and other governmental structures that are still used in modern society. Next, we will hear more about some of the notable figures that were introduced here previously.
Hello, I'm going to talk about a few notable figures within the ancient world in the history of geography. And the first of those figures is a man named Eratosthenes. He lived in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. He was born in a town named Cyrene in what is now modern-day Libya, although at the time it was part of the Greek world. And he was a writer, an astronomer, a poet, and today is sometimes referred to as the father of geography. His work was as the head of the library at Alexandria, where he was in charge of a lot of scholarly work. And today his most important contribution to the field of geography is that he was able to accurately estimate the circumference of the Earth just by using the tools available to him at the time. And the way he did this is he knew that there was a well in a town in Syene, Egypt, that during high noon on the equinox, there were no shadows down this well. And so he assumed that the sun was directly overhead. And if there were shadows cast somewhere else at the exact same time, he could use the angle of the shadow from that other place and the distance between that spot and Syene to figure out the circumference of the earth. And that is what he did. He used this shadow from where he worked in Alexandria and the distance from Alexandria to Syene to figure out the circumference of the earth. And he did that within less than 1% accuracy. And this is a map that he created of the earth. You can see on this map that it has Europe, Asia, and Africa, which he labels Libya. And it is pretty accurate for the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. The second figure I want to highlight is a man named Strabo. He lived, or was born, in modern-day Turkey at the time when Rome was transitioning from a republic to an empire. He studied extensively in Rome and also in Alexandria. He traveled extensively throughout his lifetime, and he believed that history and geography were intimately linked together. He considered Homer, the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, he considered Homer to be the father of geography because of Homer's descriptions of historical events and geographical places. So to him, Homer was the father of geography. He also wrote in Greek, and what you'll see on the right is a picture of his work Geographia, which was 17 volumes. And from Geographia is where we get a lot of our knowledge from the Greek world that predates Strabo. So we know about some of Greek thought in geography from this work. And he used his extensive travels and studied other scholars extensively in order to create this map. And you can see that it is highly influenced by the Eratosthenes map, although it is a little bit more detailed in that it has rivers. You can see the Indus and the Ganges over in India, the Tigris and Euphrates, and you can see the Danube in Europe. Also, the Iberian Peninsula, where Spain is a little bit more detailed. So he is improving a little bit upon Eratosthenes' map. And the final thinker that I want to highlight is a man named Ptolemy. He lived in the 2nd century, and sometimes you'll see his name as Claudius Ptolemy. He was born in Alexandria and lived in Alexandria, and like the other two, also wrote in Greek. He was an astronomer, a mathematician, and of course a geographer. He is maybe today best known for his geocentric model of the universe. But for our purposes, what his most important contribution is that he talked about map projections in his writing and talked about longitude and latitude. And this is a map that he created. You can see on the upper left, right on the border of the ocean, these dash marks, those are lines of latitude. And then you can also see faint lines going down through the continents. Those are lines of longitude. And you can also see that he has a little bit more detail than the Strabo map. He goes into India a little bit more and goes further east from India. So there's a little bit more of the world that he has mapped here.
So now we're moving on to ancient India and their view of geography. Geography can be seen in many ways throughout India, especially through their main religion, Hinduism. We can see that deities are attributed to many natural landmarks. For example, the Ganges River is noted as being the river of sacred healing and health, which is related to Ganga, the goddess. We can see that in other areas of India as well, they have attributed mountains and valleys and other physical landmarks to other deities throughout Hinduism. They were aware of the existence of other continents, though they didn't necessarily have the exact measurements or anything, but they were very aware of their subcontinent status and other landmarks that were around them. Ptolemy was documented as being someone who noted the shape of India, especially with its physical landmarks in the Ganges River. We can see here, in the previous slide, the way that Ptolemy was able to document the areas of India. You can see that it is much flatter and less narrow than it is in real life. However, with their technology being mostly land and sea based, this is an excellent example of a geographic map. Then we go on to Xuanzang. He was a Chinese Buddhist monk, and he made a pilgrimage through India and documented many of the geographical features. Xuanzang was a Buddhist monk, and he started his journey during the Chinese Civil War. He was later told that he was not able to take his pilgrimage through to India because Buddhism was not necessarily recognized as the main religion throughout China. Instead, he continued on with his pilgrimage and went through India to check out the cultural hearth where Buddhism arrived. He was able to document the 5 Indies, otherwise known as the 5 territories of India. A lot of scholars would also say that his map was more accurate than Ptolemy's rendition of the map. We can see here his many travels. Note particularly his travels through India. He traveled around many rivers as well as the Himalayan mountains, so he was able to get a good grasp of all of the different physical landmarks that India had. So now that we are at the end of ancient geographic thought, we would like to reiterate a couple of concepts. For a lot of people, especially in ancient Egypt as well as India, geography was less of an intentional thought process and more so attributed to deities and supernatural phenomena. However, we can see in all societies that they were considering geography, whether they knew it or not. In Greco-Roman society, history and culture were big factors in the society, and it allowed geography to thrive in their social groups. In India and China, we saw a lot of pilgrimages to better understand the world by creating maps. That was also an occurrence in Greco-Roman society as well, specifically with Ptolemy. We can see throughout all of these societies that geography played a big role in the way that they lived, the way that they thought, and the way that they explained Earth itself.